What if I told you one player was so impactful on NFL front offices that he changed how a position was drafted twice? Building it up and giving it more value than ever before, and then tearing it right back down to where it is today. Most fans would love to have a bruising running back like Derrick Henry, or a great evader like Saquon Barkley. Damn, he handsome too. But most football fans also know you don't take a running back in the first round unless it's your biggest need. There's an incredibly talented one, and it's at the back end of the first round. And for the most part, that logic applied for the better part of 20 years now since the turn of the century, and applied before this running back was drafted. In the 4 years preceding the 2015 NFL draft, no running back was picked before the 28th overall pick. Well, other than Trent Richardson by the Browns at 3rd overall, but logic has been absent from that franchise since the 60s, so doesn't really count. In 2015, though, there was a 21-year-old running back out of Georgia that was too electric and too good to ignore. Todd Gurley started as a true freshman for a Georgia team that was one of the most premier programs in the country, and would go on to go 12-2, in no small part to Gurley's 1,385 yards and 17 touchdowns. In his first college game, he rushed for 100 yards on just 8 attempts with 2 touchdowns, as well as a kick return for a touchdown. Georgia would go on to just get beat out for the SEC championship by Alabama, so Georgia would have to settle for a Capital One Bowl victory over number 23 Nebraska. Even though they would lose their season opener the next season to Clemson, Georgia looked on pace for another great season, and Gurley looked like he was on pace for an even better season than the year before. His yards per carry were a little down, but he was getting far more involved in the receiving game. He would only finish with 989 yards on the ground and 10 rushing touchdowns, though, as he would miss 3.5 games throughout the season due to injury. Gurley would go down in a close victory to LSU as Georgia managed to hold on, and would go up to 6th ranked on the season. But his impact of not being on the field was felt immediately, as they would barely squeak out a victory over an unranked Tennessee team, and would go on to lose 2 games in a row after that to a 25th ranked Missouri team and a perennial SEC basement dweller in Vanderbilt. Georgia would only finish the season 8-5 after a loss in their bowl game in the Gator Bowl to Nebraska. 2014 was looking like Todd's best season yet, with 773 yards and 8 touchdowns on 8.2 yards per carry through just 5 games. But after an NCAA investigation, Gurley was suspended for 4 games for accepting money for autographs and jerseys, something that with the new NIL rules would be allowed today. Gurley came back after the suspension to face Auburn, where Georgia would smack the top 10 team with their running back. But after 138 yards and almost 30 carries, Gurley would unfortunately tear his ACL and would be out for the rest of the season. Going into the draft, his injury history was a major concern, but he was still considered a top 20 pick by most teams, which just goes to show you how special and talented scouts thought he was, that the Rams would pick him 10th overall, even with rumors swirling about him having possible arthritis in his knees. In his rookie year, Gurley proved his value, rushing for 1,106 yards, 10 touchdowns on 4.8 yards per carry, winning Offensive Rookie of the Year, making the Pro Bowl, and making AP All-Pro second team in just his first season. Like I talked about in my last video with GMs being very reactionary, Todd had a lot of GMs feeling like it might be okay to take a running back not just in the first round, but in the top 10 again if they could have the same impact that Gurley had in his first season on an anemic Jeff Fisher offense. And a certain Ohio State running back had teams feeling like he could be the one. Ezekiel Elliott, on a powerhouse Ohio State team, put up even more impressive numbers in his college career. He would put up back-to-back 1,800-yard seasons with a combined 41 touchdowns. Elliott was named 2015 Big Ten Offensive Player of the Year, and the Cowboys saw enough in him to draft him 4th overall in the 2016 NFL Draft. And just as in college, Zeke put up even better rookie numbers than Gurley did, numbers that would turn out to be the best of his career so far. He put up 1,631 yards, 15 touchdowns on over 100 yards per game. Elliott led the league in rushing as a rookie and was third in MVP voting on the season and should have been rewarded with Offensive Rookie of the Year, but that would go to teammate quarterback Dak Prescott. This incredible season from Elliott would help carry the running back position's value into the next draft, after Gurley had somewhat of a disappointing sophomore season at the same time. Luckily though, this would be the last season that Gurley would have to play in a Jeff Fisher high school offense. With the success of 2 straight top 10 running backs, it only makes sense that 2017 provided us with 2 top 10 running backs in the same draft. That was the first time since 2005 that happened, where not only were 3 picked in the top 10, 3 were picked in the top 5 picks. Ronnie Brown, Cedric Benson, and Cadillac Williams, all of whom had solid careers but combined for a total of 1 Pro Bowl. Anyways, back to 2017. At the 4th overall pick, the Jaguars would select Leonard Fournette out of LSU, who in just his true sophomore season would put up 2,200 scrimmage yards and 23 touchdowns before getting hurt in his junior one. Only 4 picks later, Christian McCaffrey would be picked by the Carolina Panthers, who put up an even more impressive stat line as a sophomore of 2,600 yards before following it up with another season just short of 2,000 the year after. Fournette would go on to put up just over 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns, but averaged less than 4 yards per carry, and Christian McCaffrey didn't have a game of more than 66 yards on the ground, but was a lot more productive through the air with 651 receiving yards and 5 touchdowns. Elliott in 2017 would also suffer a sophomore slump like Gurley did the year before, but that was mostly due to him missing 6 games due to a suspension. On the other hand, Gurley, with new head coach Sean McVay, would go on to have not only the best year of his career, but one of the best seasons that we've seen from a running back in modern NFL history. He would go on to finish second in MVP voting, won Offensive Player of the Year, and was first-team All-Pro, thanks to 1,300 rushing yards, almost 800 receiving yards for a total 2,093 yards and 19 touchdowns. This would earn him a 4-year, $60 million contract extension from the Rams. But if you thought college football had seen the best running back prospect already with Gurley or Elliott, McCaffrey or Fournette, you'd be sorely mistaken.
Come on. Yeah. Come on.
Saquon Barkley is without a doubt the best college running back I've gotten to see in my life. In 3 years with Penn State, put up 3,843 total yards on 5.7 yards per carry and 43 touchdowns, along with 1,195 receiving yards and 8 touchdowns through the air. He was a 2-time Big Ten Offensive Player of the Year, even behind a relatively bad offensive line. Combining Gurley's MVP-level season and all the other recent success of top 10 running backs, along with Barkley's spectacular and dominant performance as an Nittany Lion through 3 years, he was pretty much guaranteed to be a top 10 pick heading into the 2018 NFL Draft. I'm not sure, though, that anyone expected him to go as high as he did to the Giants at number 2 overall. Barkley would continue the trend of successful rookie running backs, as he would put up a total yardage that almost rivaled Gurley's from the year before of 2,028. 1,300 of those were on the ground with 11 touchdowns, 721 through the air with 4 touchdowns, a performance that would earn him Rookie of the Year. In fact, all the running backs we've been talking about put up great seasons in 2018. Well, except Leonard Fournette. Zeke would bounce back and once again lead the league in rushing with 1,400, and McCaffrey broke out to make All-Pro second team with almost 2,000 total yards. Gurley topped his touchdown total with 21 this season and still put up over 1,800 total scrimmage yards. So far, this video has been all good news and a promo for why it should be okay to take a running back in the top 10 of an NFL draft, with Gurley being the shining example. But the end of the 2018 season into the playoffs is just where we start to see Gurley once again influence running backs' future draft stock. Gurley allegedly had been doing all the work that season with a knee sprain that he had been dealing with since the beginning of the season in the first game. The Rams still used him heavily, though, because he was a man they needed to rely on for their lofty playoff aspirations. The Rams did sit him for the last 2 games of the season with knee inflammation. a knee inflammation that would concern them so much that with 2 games left in the season, signed CJ Anderson out of free agency, who was released by the Panthers earlier in the year. While CJ was surprisingly great in those 2 games before the playoffs, fans still wanted Gurley back and were very concerned if he was going to be ready for the game against the Cowboys. While Gurley, with 115 yards and a touchdown, outperformed Ezekiel Elliott on the other side, who only managed 47 yards in the Rams' 30-22 victory, they were actually both outperformed by CJ Anderson. In the NFC Championship game, Gurley could only get 4 carries while Anderson got 16, and Gurley could only scrape away 10 yards, even though one of those was a touchdown. The Rams would go on to totally uncontroversially beat the Saints 26-23, despite their best player seemingly not being able to do the things he used to be able to do. But the Super Bowl against Tom Brady would prove to be a different story, as Gurley could only put up 35 yards in what was a similarly disappointing game for the Rams that ended 13-3 in what was probably the worst Super Bowl game of all time, and what would also prove to be Todd Gurley's last game of his last Pro Bowl season. Now, I could use this 2019 NFL draft to say that Gurley's injury woes at the end of the season were already having an impact on the draft, but with Zeke's great success and people weren't really sure if he was going to be able to bounce back or not, I don't think it had that much of an effect this early. Really, the reason there was no running backs drafted in the top 10 for the first time in 4 years, since before Todd Gurley, was because there just wasn't as talented of running backs in this draft as we had seen in previous years. Josh Jacobs was the first one drafted by the Raiders out of Alabama at 24, but he just did not have the same production that the rest of these guys did in college. Despite a game against the Jets where he rushed 13 times for 1 singular yard, Barkley had a solid yet slightly more pedestrian second year with the Giants. Put up 1,003 yards on the ground, 438 through the air, and a combined 8 touchdowns, but really, how can you blame him with an old-ass Eli Manning that should have retired 3 years before and Daniel Jones as your quarterbacks? Fournette would go on to have the best year of his career with 1,600 combined rushing and receiving yards, but only put up 3 touchdowns, which, combined with the fact that he was on the Jaguars, probably explains why he and Barkley were left off the Pro Bowl roster. McCaffrey, though, would continue his ascent with over 1,000 yards rushing and over 1,000 yards receiving for a total of 2,400 yards with 19 touchdowns. This would earn him All-Pro First Team and his first and still only Pro Bowl. And Zeke would go on to put up another great season with 1,400 rushing yards and 14 total touchdowns. We're not here to talk about those guys, though. We're here to talk about Todd Gurley, the rest of his career, and really the downfall of his career. Gurley would manage to only put up 1,064 scrimmage yards and 14 touchdowns, as this was far from what he had done in the previous 2 years. He just didn't look like the same runner, and it looked like that knee arthritis that was clouding his draft day was finally ringing true. These looming injuries and disagreements internally between Todd and the Rams eventually led to the Rams cutting him at the end of the season, just 2 years into his contract extension, ending with it one of the best and shortest primes of all time. I feel like 2020 was really the first season where Gurley started affecting how running backs were drafted again. Just as once the star talent was able to convince teams that running backs were worth top 10 picks again, he and his knee were the ones that terrified teams from even touching them in the first round again. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, DeAndre Swift, and Jonathan Taylor all had college careers that in past years probably would have gotten them considered in the top 20 of the NFL draft, especially one that I valued as the number 1 running back in the country, Jonathan Taylor. Even though he put up back-to-back-to-back 2,000-yard rushing seasons with a total 55 touchdowns, Taylor was the 3rd back off the board, after Edwards-Helaire, who had 1 great season at LSU, and Swift, who had great seasons at Georgia, but could have put up even better numbers if he wasn't a backfield by committee for most of his time at Georgia. Taylor, to me, though, was the best of the bunch, and if he came 2 years earlier, probably would have been a top 15 pick, maybe even top 10. But scouts' main concern about him was his usage in college, with many believing running backs can only take a certain amount of hits in their football lifetimes. This was no doubt in small part to what scouts had seen with Todd Gurley, and the downfall of the man who seemed to defy the injury gods for as long as he could. In the curse year that was 2020, the year was not kind to our running backs either. Elliott's tires looked like they were starting to wear, and he was noticeably losing his acceleration and explosiveness. For many reasons, Dallas fans were starting to be concerned that he was heading the way of Todd Gurley. After Fournette had his best season so far, many people expected him to build on it and possibly have a breakout season the next season. But he lost his starting job in the preseason to undrafted rookie James Robinson. And after the Jags couldn't even find a trade partner willing to trade for him, they released him. Though at the end of it, it would work out for the best for Fournette as he signed a one-year deal with the Bucs. And while Ronald Jones did get the bulk of the carries in the regular season, and Fournette only finished the season with 367 yards and 6 touchdowns, come playoff time in 4 games, he almost equaled that yardage output. Fournette racked up 300 yards and 3 touchdowns and will go on to win a Super Bowl with Tom Brady and the Bucs. His draft counterpart McCaffrey wouldn't have the same luck though, as after suffering a high ankle sprain in week 2, he would sit for 6 weeks before coming back in week 9, scoring 2 touchdowns and suffering a shoulder injury that would knock him out for the rest of the season. Saquon Barkley's season was a similar story, as he would tear his ACL in week 2, and obviously that would keep him out for the rest of the season. Gurley signed a 1-year deal to go back to Georgia and play for the Atlanta Falcons, but his fall from his athletic peak was obvious. He only put up 678 total yards and 9 touchdowns and would ultimately be his last in the NFL. Gurley remained a free agent for all of 2021 with no team offering to sign him, and he would announce his probable retirement in 2022. One of the most electric running backs the NFL had ever seen would take his last snap at 26 years old. Come the 2021 NFL Draft, 2 running backs were taken in the first round at 24 and 25. 2 guys out of the best 2 programs in the country, Najee Harris out of Alabama and Travis Etienne out of Clemson. While we saw the running back injuries hurt the value of running backs in the draft, King Henry's 2,027-yard season helped salvage it at least a little bit. Although with the impressive careers both these guys had in college, it wouldn't have been unrealistic that these 2 would have been top 15 picks in the draft 2 or 3 years ago. In 2021, all of our running backs really that we've been following had pretty disappointing seasons. Elliott still put up over 1,000 yards, but hit a career-low 59 yards per game and was starting to become a backfield by committee with Tony Pollard. McCaffrey was becoming every GM's nightmare, injury-prone. Fournette was becoming an efficient runner, but was only putting up 812 and was obviously not the focal point of the Buccaneer offense. And Barkley, in his return from an ACL tear, just didn't look like he had the same pop and only managed to put up 593 yards in 13 games. After a disappointing and injury-riddled season for our highly drafted running backs, and the one who started it all being completely out of the league, 2022's NFL Draft became the first since 2014, the year before Todd Gurley was drafted, to not have a running back drafted in the first round at all. And this year it wasn't due to a lack of talent. Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker, the 2 best running backs in the country, had great college careers and great final seasons. But with what teams had seen from running backs' quick-to-end careers and quick-to-end primes, no team was willing to spend a first. This year, though, while Fournette and Elliott's declines continue, McCaffrey looks like he's back to his old self with a new team, new coach, and his health. And Barkley looks like one of the best running backs in the league with new head coach Brian Daboll and another year removed from the ACL recovery. With the success of these 2 and yards per carry being at an all-time high in the NFL, there may be at least one team in the first round that takes a chance on a certain running back out of Texas that will no doubt be the first running back off the board and whose talents no doubt would have gotten him drafted in the top 10 just a few years back. This is a video and a topic that was very dear to me as a Rams fan. No one was a bigger fan of Todd Gurley than me. I love the guy. He was so exciting, and it hurt me so much to see his talent and his prime just fall off a cliff as fast as it did. So, most reasonable outsiders would sum the Gurley pickup at number 10 to be a mistake. And I understand that. But for what he did for the franchise, I don't think it was. I really don't. His prime was short-lived, but it shined brighter than anyone else's, which is exactly what the Rams needed at a time when they were moving to LA, when they were going to be fighting with the Chargers for fans in this fan base. For me as a Rams fan, I was a fan before the Rams even moved back to Los Angeles, because my dad was a fan of the Rams before they left Los Angeles the first time to go to St. Louis. So I really wanted not only the Rams to just succeed, but I wanted Los Angeles to accept Rams as their team. And, say what you want about the fan base. I know we're always going to get a lot of flack, for a lack of fans. But, that's just what happens when a city, a very populous city, is without an NFL franchise for 20 years. People are going to adopt new teams, and especially people come to LA, they're coming from other places. But I think the Rams have really solidified themselves as the team of the city, especially over the Chargers. So, really the Rams had next to nothing going for them when they were coming from St. Louis. Jeff Fisher was still their coach. Outside of Aaron Donald, really there was nothing to be excited about. So, Aaron Donald was great, but offense attracts the fans. They needed a guy like Todd Gurley, and I feel confident in saying that the Rams would have had a much harder time becoming LA's team without Todd Gurley. But, we've solidified ourselves as relevant in the city of Los Angeles, and the Chargers are still floundering with that, even with a franchise quarterback. And, you could say that it's due to the Super Bowl win this year, but I think we were relevant before it, and I think that's due to our early success and our Super Bowl appearance, which I guarantee you would not have happened without Todd Gurley. So if you ask me to redraft that draft, I wouldn't blame you if you picked someone else at the 10th overall pick, but I would still take Todd Gurley at the 10th overall pick if I were the Rams. Maybe part of that is that we ended up winning a Super Bowl anyways, so the loss doesn't hurt as much. Maybe that bitterness of how it ended with Todd, is a bit removed, but I'll always appreciate what TG did for this franchise. I really will. It did for me as a fan. I love the guy, and man, it hurts so bad to see his prime fall off, but I loved it when he was here. So, thanks, man. Even though I know you won't see this, I appreciate you.